for those that tune in later. We are going to actually hold this twice. Due to electrical issues and things like that, we felt like we still needed availability to all of you that have joined us, and then we have several others that were unable to join us. So we'll be doing this again next week. If you have to step away or you lose service, you can go back and look at our recording. I'll have that posted, but we'll also put up a new time and date for next week. So I appreciate you all joining us. I hope you've all seen our YouTube video. How this is going to work is I'm going to share my screen again so I can kind of walk you through this. As you all know, you're all muted. I am going to have availability for my professionals to be able to speak. I know some of you are on the phone, and hopefully you've got tons of questions to ask. I already have one in the chat. So I will share the new time. I will share it with everybody that has registered to come to this event, and we'll publish it again. So if we need new people to register, they can. So yes, I will send the new time to everyone that has come in and given us an email address. So for those of you that are not familiar with Zoom, how we're going to do this so we didn't have so many people talking at one time. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, hold on just a minute. Okay, so now I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see our district, our local district information. Dewey County is our host for this conservation cover crop discussion. And so we've got all of their information available that will be on accessible to you as well. If you are not in the Dewey County Conservation District, I recommend that you go to your local conservation district or NRCS office, and you'll find a list under this website right here. This is the Oklahoma Conservation Commission website, and it'll be under district listing. And so I recommend you go here, look to see if you have someone in your area you can go to. And I guarantee you will. We have 84 districts across the state. So that obviously means we have more than one in several of our counties. So, and then also join us on our Facebook pages. We have Western Soil Health. That's a private page so that you have comfort of asking questions without being judged. And then just ask to join, and then we'll have someone be able to join you to that group. Then we also have the Oklahoma Soil Health page. It's public. You can go in and like it, and we give updates and event calendars and things like that. Also, I recommend joining our email or text message option. We sent this out through, it's a .gov delivery system. You'll see it come from the commission, but you can sign up for those announcements also on the Conservation Commission website. So next item on the list, I'm going to end that show there, and we're going to go to our Zoom meeting so I can show you how to utilize our, okay, it's not going to allow me to show you it. So if you are on a computer and you're not familiar with Zoom, what I would like for you to do, on the very bottom of your screen in the Zoom box, there is a list of mute, stop video, security, participants, chat. And the chat is where I want you to ask questions. So you can go in there and select the chat button, and you'll see a box pop up on your screen. That's a white box. And down at the bottom, you can select for everyone to see, or you can just send it to me. I'm Amy Seeger, or to Gregory Scott. I would prefer you to at least send it to everyone or myself, because I will be asking the questions. So as you submit them, please send them to this location. Okay, Colita, I'm going to unmute you. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. Did I lose everyone, Greg?
You're back.
Okay, sorry. All right, Kalita, is Paul near, or is he on his own computer?
He's in the other room on the phone.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask which number he is so I can let him speak. Is it the 580 one?
Probably the 580-328-5331 or 5321.
Okay, yep, that's it. I'm asking him to unmute. I don't know if this is working or not. There he goes. Okay. Paul, do you mind giving us a overview of how Dewey County works with cover crops, how you work with producers, your success stories, a general discussion of what you've utilized in your area?
Yeah, I'll tell you, generally we have people that are generally either new to soil health or have been doing soil health, so they usually come in and start inquiring about it. And a couple of success stories that we've had, generally it starts off with people asking what all entails. I talk to them about, we're trying to add organic matter to their soil, and one of the ways to do it is by planting some diversity out there. Most of the producers in this part of the world are planting continuous wheat or triticale or rye, and I try to get them to understand of basically to put some diversity in there by incorporating cover crop mix that is multi-species that might be 60% grasses and 30% legumes, and then 10% broadleaf or some plant species that'll break a hard pan down there, a hoof pan. So then they generally want to know the planting rate, which, you know, the best success I've seen here is in the 20 pound to 25 pound planting rate. And generally, you know, they always want to know a cost, which is, you know, variable from year to year. But if you compare that to the cost of putting down commercial fertilizer, it's quite affordable. And some of the other things that, one of the, seems like a consistent question that I've always get asked, well, if I grow this, can I hay this? So it always brings out the discussion, well, when you do that, you're converting, instead of having a cover crop out there, you're making it a cash crop. So no, we really don't want you to cut it for hay, but what we'd rather you do is add the principle of adding livestock into the system of soil health by grazing. So the success story I want to share with you today is that we had a producer this year that just new to starting soil health, came in through state cost share and planted a cover crop. One of the things about Dewey County this year during the growing season, we've been in a D2 drought, which is a severe drought all growing season long. So about late June, we had a dry line come through the county, and a lightning strike set a wildfire on that part of the county, and it burned across his entire pasture. So he went to take his cattle, and he didn't have any place to go with his cattle. So that interaction I had with him about grazing the cover crop, he called the office and said, hey, is that still an option for me to graze that cover crop? And I told him absolutely. So he put his cattle out there and grazed them 30 to 45 days, which gave his rangeland a rest after the wildfire that went through there, and he was pleased as can be. So it opened up a window for him to see some diversity in how to use a cover crop system when he was in a bind with his grazing and also in a drought.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate you sharing that. Sorry, I had a tickle in my voice. So well, how long ago was that?
It was June of this year, and then he grazed from the end of June through July to about the middle of August.
Has his rangeland recovered now that he can put cattle on there for the winter?
Yeah, at one point he opened up the gate where they could get into both, where he had planted the cover crop and also his rangeland, and they were going back and forth. So yeah, it has recovered. He did get an excellent burn on some brush though.
So can you give me, and you might have said this, and I apologize if I missed it, give me basic numbers. I know you said you were in a drought, but can you give me numbers of rain inches that you've had over the last year or so?
I haven't looked at the mesonet, but my guess is we're probably about in 12 to 14 range, and that was before this ice event.
What is normal for that area by this point?
The county ranges from 26 to 28.
So you're about half of what you should have been. So this was a good alternative for that option for letting those rangelands rest for sure.
Yeah, and it did him some benefit.
Yes, yeah. So I have a question from an individual on here, and it says, what are environmentally, and this, I'm going to leave this to either Paul or Greg. It says, what are environmentally sound and efficient techniques for establishing a progression towards year-round horse forage during current conditions in a field dominated by ragweed, sneezeweed, and Bermuda grass in Tulsa County? So, Paul, do you want to use that one or do you want to defer? I'll let you have first option.
I'll defer to Greg.
Okay. I figured, Tulsa County's a little ways from Dewey County, but we're all well known to be trained in all. So, all right, Greg, I'm going to let you have that one.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Oh, Greg, can you introduce yourself? I'm sorry, before we get started.
I'm Greg Scott. I'm a soil scientist, and I served as the state soil scientist for the NRCS in Oklahoma. And currently I work part-time for the Conservation Commission, basically doing soil health consulting and teaching. The first question that I've got that we typically have when we talk about horses, and apologies if it sounds offensive, is, do you have enough land? A lot of people have more horses than their land under any system could support with year-round grazing. But the first thing that I would do would know that I could balance out the number of acres with the number of horses, or have a budget for the amount of hay that I was going to use over the year in the operation and include that in my forage budget. But then we would be looking at developing multiple paddocks and looking at basically grasses that we could introduce into that system that are cool season and that are good for horses.
Oh, I think Greg froze on us. He looks frozen. Okay, we're going to hope that he comes back. And
okay?
Okay, there you go. Yes. We stopped at cool season. It's where we finished hearing you talk. So
I'm out here on a dedicated line, but it's not the best. Essentially, we need to think about adding in species for the cool season growth that will not try to compete with Bermuda in the warm season. But we also, so we would look at fescue, perennial ryegrass, possibly even annual ryegrasses, and maybe brome, but also look at some legumes that will provide for those nitrogen needs. And that's the progression, is balance out, know that your acres, are balanced out with the number of head, have a good forage budget, begin to develop paddocks so that we can rotate, graze, and rest the forage that's not being grazed. And then think about the species that we want to add in. I would hesitate to just spray herbicides indiscriminately, because we are going to add in species that have other benefits, especially the nitrogen, and those are incompatible with herbicide use. But small pasture rotations,
Oh, we're at pause again.
your local district or Amy, and we can come out and do a consultation on your place.
Greg, some of the questions they ask here, and I'm gonna toss out some questions just because we're familiar with what people ask a lot of. So this individual that is asking questions about it has 3 horses per 7 acres. And also they kind of wanted to know the cool seasons and would they compete with ragweed. Could you give a brief information about what our indicators are if we have tons of ragweed and broomweed within our pasture settings? Or not broom.
A Bermuda grass pasture, just the fact that it exists indicates that it was originally farmed and has typically been eroded and depleted. And when we got to where we didn't think we could farm it, we established grass to it, and Bermuda grass was the only thing that we put in there. Those species tend to be indicators of overgrazing, and 3 horses on 7 acres is not enough acreage to meet the needs of those horses' nutrition. And so they are going to overgraze, even though we feed and hay. It's just part of their nature that they are grazers, and that's their main activity. So we need to introduce plant diversity so that the plants that I want will compete with the ragweed and the broomweed. We need small fields so that we can actually trample the weeds that we don't want when we are grazing those pastures. But the cool season plants are typically the ones that become active in late August into September and stay green through the winter. And then like fescue typically will go dormant in May. The ryegrasses that are annual germinate in the fall and stay green over winter and put on most of their biomass in the spring and then produce seed and die. And then that seed germinates again in the fall. So the goal is to build that plant diversity, but also to control the grazing time so that the plants that we want out there will have an opportunity to grow and compete with the weeds. The situation that you would typically have in a small pasture like 7 acres with several horses is that they're continually grazing the Bermuda grass. And since they don't graze the ragweed and the broomweed, they grow at and get their maximum growth because they're out competing the Bermuda. So, a customized system would be built around smaller paddocks and limiting the time that the horses have access to each of those paddocks. And in that system, we know that a lot of their nutrition is being met by hay. It's just a combination of their natural behavior and not enough acres.
Always forget to hit the unmute button. Thank you, Greg. We right now do not have very many more questions. So what I'm going to do is kind of instigate some discussion. Please feel free, guys, to submit your questions on the chat line. We have it right here on the side. Underneath, you'll see where it says chat in a box, and you can type in there. If you do not feel comfortable sending them out to everyone, just send them directly to me, Amy Seeger, and I'll ask them for you and leave the name quiet. So I'm going to also have, I'm going to talk to Jimmy Emmons here in a minute. I wanted to ask Paul if you're available. Paul, can you give me some insight from the NRCS side and conservation side of how you can assist producers if they're wanting to start cover crops, or also, you know, as we had discussion here for pasture management, Greg mentioned cool season interseeding mixes. I consider those a cover crop from Bermuda because we obviously can't have Bermuda grow in the winter. But I know there's some limitations with that within necessarily programs, but I know that NRCS can provide some technical assistance, and we also have partners that can provide technical assistance. But just give me an overview of what you can do as an NRCS staff member and assistant to the conservation districts to provide producers.
One of the things that we can do is NRCS has a soil health card, which we can come out to your property and basically do a soil health assessment on your cropland or your rangeland or pasture land. In cropland, we're looking at a comparison, a starting point. Basically, here's a benchmark is where you're at. And then if you start doing some soil health principles, where you could go to and basically come back in a year or two and go through that soil health card again. In regards to the rangeland and pasture land, we can come out and do a range health assessment or a pasture land condition score to kind of give you once again, a baseline. Here's where you're at. If this is where you want to go, here's some things that you can implement or practice to basically get you to the point you want to be at, which is all, you know, free technical assistance that we apply.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so we have a question. It says, they just cleared some cedars in Hughes County area ranging from 1 to 5 acres. What should I plant so that that ground is covered for the winter? So I'm going to toss that out to Greg again, if that's okay.
The easiest thing to do at this point, and probably the cheapest thing you could do, would be to plant some cereal rye on those areas, and it will germinate down at pretty low temperatures. It won't make a dramatic and rapid cover, but it will germinate, and you'll probably see a lot of other plants that show up throughout the winter because we really will get a lot of germination in November. Some of the things that you don't necessarily like mare's tail, but the land is pretty good at covering itself back up. But that's why I would find some cereal rye, plant about 60 pounds per acre. You should be able to locate it for about 15 cents a pound, and we'd prefer to drill it, but you could broadcast it and drag something to cover it a little bit. at this date, that would be the most cost-effective thing you could do.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask Jimmy to join us really quick. So Jimmy Emmons is our producer from Dewey County that was highlighted in the video that we had recommended watching prior to this meeting. So I wanted Jimmy to give even more in-depth discussion of the aha moments, the exploration of different cover crops, and the journey he's been on for soil health, your time frame, just the general, here's what we've been doing, here's how it's gone, and where can other producers get started.
So 8 years ago, Greg Scott and NRCS all came out, the Conservation Commission, and we discussed about doing cover crops and soil health practices on the farm. And we started then. We worked with the district. I was on the board at that time in Dewey County. So we formed a great partnership how we could highlight what we were seeing. And probably the aha moment was the second year in, and that would have been in 2012, in the middle of a drought, and we planted a warm season mix of about 8 or 10 different things, and it survived. It came up, but I also left a check area that was bare and kind of simulating what most producers would do in that time frame of the year here in Dewey County. And in the fall or early fall, we went out with a probe, and it was very hard in the bare soil down about 16 inches, and where we had covers, and they were in the middle of the drought, they only got about waist high, knee high to waist high. And in them covers, we could probe down to 34 inches all the way. And what that was, there was a dry layer in the bare soils, and where I had a cover crop that had more, well, it had twice as much in the profile. And so that was kind of the aha moment for me, and I've never looked back. Greg and the team was out the past several weeks working with us on water infiltration in some of these first fields. And the soil has really changed dramatically. We continue to try to keep everything covered in between cash crops, and it's been an exciting venture. It took about 2 or 3 years to really get things kind of figured out in my head. You know, what to do, what to plant, when to plant, how to manage residue early. And, you know, in the beginning, we couldn't find an earthworm in the field anywhere. And this past few weeks, we found, you know, anywhere from 30 to 40 per square foot in that first original field. So that's been the really telltale sign of how our health of our soil has changed. And they're doing the tilling for us, pulling the residue down. So they're doing the residue management for us. They're eating it, turning it into nutrients, but they're also providing water infiltration points for us. And so now we can take in a 7 or 8 inch rain with no runoff hardly in a short period of time. So that's the key in these dry times. And back to your question to Paul earlier, I looked on the Mesonet in the last 6 months, we've had anywhere from 9 to 10 inches in southwest Dewey County out of the 25 that we should have. So it's been very, very dry up till the last couple of days here. So the key is you've got to be able to catch what falls when it falls, so you can use it later instead of letting it run off. So that's been a real change for us, and it helps water quality and quantity down the road as well.
So Jimmy, you said you started this journey in a drought, and now we're to the place we are now where you were in a drought. So what's the difference between the two when you started and where you are now? And have you had, bushel differences or production differences?
So our production is probably stayed pretty flat. Maybe in the second, third year, maybe we were a little lower, but our input costs were lower because we weren't out there tilling. So we had less equipment, less man hours, less fuel on the ground. And now 8 years later, we're using about 20% of the synthetic fertilizers that we used to use. And we're really trying to cut back on chemicals, and we're using more biological seed treatments and compost tea and humates and various things to help Mother Nature mineralize what we have in the soil to make the nutrients. So even though my production may have stayed pretty flat, my cost have went down. And so that's been a big help to us, because like you said, in the last, since the last 8 or 9 years, we've been in a major drought. We've had a major wildfire and then another drought here as well. So we have really took out, I would say, some of the lows and some of the highs in the weather swings. So we've been able to be a little bit more resilient. We can go a little further in the drought growing because we have more water to use. But then normally droughts are followed by heavy rainfall events. And so we've been able to capture more of that. So we've took out a lot of the runoff on the top side, and then on the bottom side, we've been able to save a lot more on our inputs.
It's amazing to see the difference on your property. Do we have any more questions from the audience? I'm going to double check to make sure I haven't missed anything. We really wanted to keep this short and sweet, hoping that you watched the video, the YouTube video. If you had any questions, that you would feel free to ask those questions. I encourage you to go watch that. You'll see more of Jimmy's story. You'll see Steve Osball, our NRCS staff, soil scientist, state soil scientist, talking about the cover crops and the benefits of the plant species that we select. And then you also see Greg discussing the water infiltration. So I don't want to keep you over the time we had discussed. I will send out an information on the next meeting for those that possibly did not have electricity. So if you want to join us again, maybe you've looked at the video or decided to wait to watch the video, you could join us again and come up with more questions. It was a real basic general overview. I wanted you to have the opportunity to meet Dewey County Conservation District. Colita, do you have anything to say on behalf of the district?
The cover crop program has worked really well in our Oklahoma State cost share, and we've introduced to lots of new producers using the Oklahoma State cost share.
So I recommend all of you, whether you're a producer, a university, or an individual looking for some assistance, we really try to utilize ecology to maintain a balanced system. And we do understand that there are some chemical synthetic needs that will have to be addressed occasionally. And speaking of that, we had someone ask of how to get rid of grass burrs. So we're going to answer this one last question and then sign off and look forward to talking to you all again soon. Greg, do you mind answering that question? It's one often, that's why I'm laughing a little bit. We get
sandburrs are a huge nuisance, and they're a species that is particularly adapted to taking advantage of places where your soil is just a little bit sandy and where you have low plant diversity and where you don't have enough ground cover where you leave a lot of bare ground. Sandburrs essentially are the bullies that are going to move in on bare ground and compete. If I do not leave enough biomass to cover the surface, and if I don't have enough plant diversity to crowd those out. Now, that being said, the cheapest traditional way to control sandburrs is to spray Roundup at the rate of about 6 ounces per acre. Difficult for most people to do to get that low, but that's an effective treatment that will kill sandburrs but not hurt Bermuda grass. That being said, if I can kill my sandburrs, but if I do not leave enough Bermuda grass at the end of the season, or any kind of forage, if I leave bare ground at the end of the summer growing season, and the next spring I will be giving the sandburrs the opportunity to germinate on all that bare ground. So the systematic way of controlling sandburrs is to have a grazing system that allows 8 to 10 inches of forage and very little bare ground anytime during the year.
We're on pause again. We'll see if he catches in. I have had issues with sandburrs in my yard, and if you're looking at a yard standpoint or even a Bermuda grass field, if you actually allow it to grow taller, it will help protect that ground area. Anytime you've got disturbance and you have a sandy site with Bermuda grass, there we go. You cut off on us in the middle of how much forage to leave.
Yeah. If I could maintain 8 to 10 inches of ground cover, or 8 to 10 inches of height and 100% ground cover in my grazing system, the sandburrs are not going to be able to compete. So the simplest way to get rid of them is to outcompete them, but that requires me to manage that whole system for high biomass, by not overgrazing, by using a rotation grazing system, and building up the fertility in that soil so that the plants that I want can compete. And the system perspective then would be to use some legumes, maybe even some other forbs that recycle nutrients well. But like I say, the root cause of our sandburr problems is having a pasture that's overgrazed, never gets rested, doesn't have enough ground cover. And I'm certainly not immune to that myself, as I discovered on one of my pastures at the end of summer this year. We had some show up where I didn't expect them to, so I'm going to have to increase the intensity of my management on that pasture to give it more rest periods. And then when the animals do come through and I have an intense grazing event, even if we have sandburrs germinated, they will graze those before they go to seed and graze them out in a mob situation. So like I say, there is a chemical solution, but it doesn't address the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is my management.
Thank you, Greg. Paul?
I'll chime in on the sandburrs too,
There you go.
if you don't mind.
Nope, that's where I was heading.
One of the ways that, and personally, I've had success with the sandburr problem is to control them with a prescribed burn in the late growing season. If you've got a abandoned cropland that's taken over sandburrs, or you've got a sandburr problem in pasture land, if you'll do August, September burn when the seeds are still on the head, you'll help control that problem. You're not going to get rid of it, but you're going to help control it and set it back where you can then start with the chemical herbicide program to control that.
So the individual that asked about the sandburrs is also the one from Hughes County where they've removed cedar in their rangeland. Have you, if you want to send a yes or no, have you had problems with the sandburrs coming into the areas where you've removed the cedars? Actually, you don't even have to answer that. This might be an opportunity for you to go ahead and plant in those areas heavier and choke those areas out if you've got sandburrs in those areas, or at least prevent some bare cover. So you'd want to get some cool season in there and then some warm season grasses to take hold, not to give the sandburrs a chance to do it ahead of time. So would you agree, Greg?
You bet. You bet. I wouldn't look for the sandburrs to come in real heavy on the areas where they push the cedars, but they certainly could be there.
She said no. So
Okay.
another location. But all right. So thank you all. I appreciate you being a part of this. I will post also the contact information for Dewey County, and then also the other contact information that I have. Please feel free to give us a call, shout, anything like that. And if you didn't get all your questions answered, join us again. We'll do a round 2 next week, and just be looking forward to it. I'll send it out to everybody's email. Thank you, and y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.